Hello, everyone. I'm Courtney Muma, Deputy Director of the Texas Digital Library. Welcome to the annual users group meeting for Vireo ETD. So I'll go over a little of what we'll be doing today. Thank you for joining us for this annual meeting. Again, I'm Courtney Muma, TDL's Deputy Director, and TDL, Texas Digital Library, is of course the organizational home for the Vireo ETD open source system. We'll follow this agenda today, starting with these introductory remarks and a few polls to get to know who all is attending today. And then next, after that, we'll have updates from the Vireo product manager, as well as the development status update. We'll take a short break if we need it, and we'll discuss accessibility work that we've done in the past year or so. And we'll finish up with a call for feedback on current work and some open time then for some Q&A and discussion amongst users. So Billy will share with you in the agenda, in the chat, a link to our agenda that you see here also in this slide. There's also a shared community notes document, and I'd like to ask that if you're planning to take notes today, that you help out by doing so in that shared notes document in the spirit of sharing and community. The link, if you miss it, is also provided in the agenda and there in chat. And then after the meeting, we'll share the video and slides with the entire community sometime within the next week. And you'll also have access to those notes, of course. Throughout the meeting today, again, please use the Zoom chat to list your questions as you think of them, and we'll address them either in the moment or during the Q&A during the time we've set aside at the end. And also use the chat throughout the meeting to add your kind of Vireo wish list items, and we'll be able to capture those. You can also add those at the bottom of the community notes. So I'll start with just a few remarks about who the Texas Digital Library is. The TDL is the organizational home, of course, for the Vireo open source software project. TDL is a library consortium based in Texas that provides services that enable open access, built on shared open infrastructure and sustained through a strong, collaborative, and mutually supportive community. For TDL and many users outside of TDL, Vireo is just one piece of an ecosystem of software and systems that support open access to scholarship. In addition to providing Vireo as a service, TDL hosts DSpace digital repositories that more often than not serve as the deposit location for theses and dissertations submitted via Vireo or other workflows. We also host the Texas Data Repository, a Dataverse repository used for publishing research data, as well as just under 100 open access journals in the Open Journal Systems platform. More recently, we began harvesting from our members' repositories to the Digital Public Library of America through our partnership with our fellow TexHub service providers at the University of North Texas. Through this ecosystem, TDL is providing free and open access to many hundreds of thousands of items, including theses and dissertations. We see Vireo as a key component of this open research infrastructure and are proud to support it for our members and facilitate its use for a global community of users who deploy and maintain it under the open source license. We believe that community-supported and open research infrastructure, as opposed to commercial, for-profit, and proprietary, is the best path towards sustainable, equitable, and ethical open access to scholarship. And we invite you through this meeting to engage with us in supporting it and contributing to its long-term sustainability. TDL has been working with Vireo since its beginnings in 2007 as an IMLS-funded project led by developers at Texas A&M University Libraries, one of our founding members. Texas A&M continues to serve a crucial role in contributing development resources to the project, and they are aided by coding and governance contributions from Texas Tech Libraries, Baylor Libraries, University of Illinois, UT Southwestern Medical, University of Houston, Johns Hopkins, and other contributors from within the TDL and Vireo open source community of users. TDL also hosts Vireo as a service for 13 of our member institutions, highlighted here in purple on the slide. Many representatives from those TDL member organizations are with us today, and I want to say a special welcome to all of you. So, speaking of that community, let's find out who's with us today. If you will, please go ahead and drop your name and institution into the chat box and maybe where you're joining us from so we can get an idea of who's represented here today. If you feel like it, tell us what the weather's like where you are. It's really warm here, but still kind of feels like crisp fall in the morning in San Antonio, Texas. Let us know if you've got any pet coworkers with you. For example, I've got Memphis the cat and Casey the dog. We'll also run a few polls in a few minutes to better get to know who's with us today in terms of your use of Vireo. Also, while you're adding your intro to the chat, and I see you doing it, thank you so much. I'll introduce your host from the Texas Digital Library and our fabulous Vireo User Group Steering Committee. So I'm going to ask that our TDL representatives give a wave when I mention your name. So first off, Christy Park, TDL's Executive Director. Next up, Frank Smutniak, TDL's lead Vireo developer. Christopher Starcher, who joined us in the last year as Vireo's product manager. And of course, I'm Courtney Mumma, you know me, Deputy Director, and also Vireo Service Manager for TDL. There might be other TDL staff present. I can't see the list of people right now, but if you're there, give us a wave. Thank you so much. Our other hosts today, as I mentioned, are the Vireo Steering Committee, which organizes all Vireo user group activities, including this annual meeting. It also solicits ideas from the users group about how to improve Vireo, documents the ideas, and organizes them. Frank and I serve as part of that steering committee, but the group is led by two co-chairs, one from a TDL member institution and one from outside of the TDL consortium. One of our current co-chairs is Billy Peterson Lugo from Baylor University. Billy, please say hello and tell us what you do at Baylor and with Vireo.
There we go. Hi, good morning. At Baylor, I'm the Associate Dean for Library Collection Systems and Digital Services. And with Vireo, I sort of coordinate all of the activities that take place within the system. I don't usually do a lot of detailed work in it, although I am currently setting up a workflow and documenting that for others.
Awesome. Thank you, Billy. Our other co-chair is Emily Wookner from the University of Illinois. Emily, please say hello and tell us what you do at the University of Illinois and with Vireo.
Hi, I am the Director for Student Academic Development at the University of Illinois, and I manage the thesis deposit process for our students. And so I work very closely in Vireo to make sure that everybody can get their theses uploaded, and I work with our colleagues at the library to make sure that everything moves very smoothly through the deposit process.
Thank you, Emily. Another of our VUG steering committee members joining us today is John Krosno from UT Southwestern Medical Center. John, you know what to do.
Hi, I'm the head of acquisitions and strategic engagement here at UT Southwestern. And with Vireo, I'm the Vireo admin. So I provide the primary support for our campus for the Vireo use, and I coordinate with the staff members in the various dean's offices that are the point of contact for the students. So that's what I do.
Thank you, John. So the steering committee will actually be changing soon. Our long dedicated co-chair, Billy, will retire in 2026. Her service has been essential to many of the milestones that Vireo ETD and its community have achieved together. So first of all, thank you, Billy. You know we're going to miss you so much, and we wish you all the best. And we're so glad you're going to stick around a little longer to help us transition. And so John Krosno has agreed to step into that co-chair role when it's vacated by Billy. Thank you, John. And we will also have a new member who I do see on the participant list, is with us today. So Shannon, I hope you don't mind saying hello and introducing yourself to the group and tell us a little bit about what you do at Rice University.
Sure, and apologies, my camera is not behaving this morning, so I'm off video. But I'm Shannon Kippett Smith. I'm the scholarly communication librarian at Rice University in Houston, and I work a lot with our repository side of things. So making sure that those theses and dissertations that have gone through the Vireo process are getting pushed in. But I have, over the past year or so, been working a little bit more on the Vireo side of things. So I'm really excited to get to know Vireo a little bit more and dig deeper and serve on the steering committee.
Thank you. We're so excited to have you with us. You'll be joining our monthly meetings soon, and we're really looking forward to your new contributions to reinvigorate our steering committee. So thank you. You might also notice from the slide here that Christopher Starcher also serves in the role of product owner for Vireo. And the person in this role serves as the liaison between the Vireo user group and the development team. They receive the prioritized list of software improvements from the steering committee and the greater user group, and then negotiate the adoption of those features and changes by developers. The product owner also has the final say on whether or not system functionality sufficiently addresses all those requested needs. And so I just want to say, Chris, thanks for doing double duty. And we really appreciate you. And Christopher, did you have a chance to introduce you? I don't think you have yet. So if you can say hello and tell you what you do at Texas Tech.
Okay, my name is Christopher Starcher, and I am the Digital Systems Librarian at Texas Tech University. Interestingly enough, I don't really do anything with Vireo at my institution, but I do things with Vireo in just about every other way outside of my institution. So I'm involved with the user group steering committee. I'm on the committee. I'm the product owner. And I'm also the product manager, which we'll get into a little bit later. And I'm also on the development team.
Thank you, Christopher. Happy to have you with us as always. And Christopher will be sharing with you more later on in the presentation today. So time for our polls. The first, give me a second to get sorted here so I can share these. Let's see. There are going to be 3 questions. Oh, that's not the one I want. One moment. That is not. I'm having technical difficulties. So if you can do me a favor, and we're going to pivot, if you can share what version of Vireo you are using in the chat, that would be helpful. So are you using Vireo 2, 3, 4, or none of the above? So happy to see so many people on 4. I love it. Charles, super specific. Thank you. 431. Yes. Susan also. James, 2 versions going on right now at Texas A&M IC. Give about 10 more seconds for folks to share before we move on to the next. Thank you, everybody. Much appreciated. So I'm going to move on to the next question now, and this is a very, very easy one. This is a yes or no question. If there were more opportunities to talk with other Vireo users throughout the year, would you attend? Oh, I'm loving all these yeses. We had a feeling about this, and Christopher will talk about this a little bit later, but we had some feelings that people would probably want this. So we'll definitely talk more about this later, but it's good to see so many yeses. Thank you all. And a probably. All right. Thank you. Thank you. No no's, so that's good. So we'll move on then to my last question for you, which is, what is your level of expertise with Vireo? And I would say the levels would be expert, advanced, intermediate, novice, or none of those. So expert, advanced, intermediate, novice, or none of the above. All right, we've got a lot of variety and quite a few new people. I'm guessing for the newer folks, probably more frequent meetings would be even more desirable. All right, give you another about 10 seconds here on that one. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on. Thank you so much for sharing, and I apologize for the glitch there. My survey was not available to me for some reason. So Zoom is always a changin'. Next up, we're going to hear from Christopher Starcher. More about his work that he's been working on specifically in the last year as Vireo product manager. He's going to talk about his priorities and what he's done so far towards those, and also some of his plans for the coming year. And again, just a reminder, pop questions in the chat. We'll do our best to capture them in the moment, and if not, we'll address them towards the end. So with that, I'll hand over to you, Christopher.
Okay, thank you, Courtney. This is great. I'm glad to see everybody here. This is a good turnout, and I appreciate everyone's involvement here and answering our questions. This really does help us to know what you're thinking and your needs. As I mentioned earlier, I have 3 distinct roles with the Vireo project. Right now, I'm going to talk about the role of project manager. This is a role that I started a couple of years ago with the Vireo project, specifically with TDL. And my work as product manager is focused specifically on making the Vireo project sustainable. It's important to think about these things because to sustain an open source project, you must plan and you must have healthy communities. While this is certainly true for the development community, which I'll talk about first, and I do spend much of my time focused on this, on the development community and the development needs of the project. It's also true for the user community, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. These priorities here are our current priorities for the next year. Some of these have been priorities in previous years, and they continue, specifically the first ones. These are priorities that are perpetual. They will continue to go on. They're also always improvements that can be made in these areas. One of the main areas that I've been focusing on is to lower barriers for development participation. And we've had a pretty small development team over the years. And so this was identified as a place that we needed to really focus to make sure that the project itself was sustainable in the future. And so we are focusing on improving technical documentation for the developers. We've been working on this quite a bit, and we'll continue to do so. As I said, this is a perpetual task. This just continues. We're always working on this and always will be. And the same goes for our development processes. We have improved our development processes over the past couple of years. And we still have some things that we need to implement, and we will continue to focus on this. Clear communication for contributors, or more responsive communication for contributors. This one's very important to me personally. As a developer on the project, when I first came in, I was greeted with open arms by the development team. But there was some lack of coordinated communication a little bit, and it wasn't really anyone's failing. It just was, that's not where the project was at the time. And so this has become a high priority for me, and I find it very important to value each developer and each team member on the development team, make sure that they feel a part of the team and that their voice is heard by me and by the others on the team. And so we will always continue to improve that. The next one is open source software funding strategies. We are discussing this and thinking about this, and we have been for a while. And I'll talk about that a little bit in the later. Long-term software development roadmap. This is one that I've been spending a good amount of time on recently. As we know, any project that does not look into the future will die, and that's certainly true for open source software projects. We are working to make this type of planning a priority for the Vireo project, and so I'm working on that now, and I'll talk about that here in just a little bit. And then, as I said earlier, the user community is so important. If there's no user community, there's no project. We can have all of the developers in the world and make all of the software that we can, but if we don't have users, it doesn't matter. And so you all who are in the user community are so very important to us. And we're always thinking about and discussing ways to improve your ability to interact with us and engagement and those kinds of things. And I'll talk a little bit about that. As Courtney mentioned earlier, we'll talk a little bit about that later on. So the work so far that we've done over this past year, this is just specific to just the past year since our last meeting. I won't go into the things that we did before that because I addressed those last meeting. But I want to highlight a few things. One of the things that I'm super proud of and just really kind of giddy about is that during our last series of sprints in the spring, we had, I think, three full-length sprints during the spring. We had 5 new developers that contributed their very first code to Vireo during those sprints. And that's really that's amazing. If you know the history of development on Vireo, that is something that the entire development team is so proud of and so happy about. So they contributed code, all 5 of them, and even just as important to the code that they contributed to our team and the personality of the team and our discussions, and really helped us have different perspectives and different points of views as we on the development team discuss features and and the future of Vireo and how to move forward and to do our development work. That is so important. And so having extra voices is just it's almost immeasurably beneficial. It really is. And I can't thank them all enough for being present in those meetings and feeling um, that they could share their opinions and that they felt part of the team. So thank you all, the new ones. I know some of you are here, so thank you all so much. It really did mean a lot. And I know I've told you all this, but I'll tell it in front of everybody else. It meant a lot to all of us. So thank you very much. Um, so we are working right now on long-term software development roadmap. One of the biggest things I've done so far is to interview the development team. We've had individual development team interviews with the developers, and it's been really great. So much good information, good perspectives have come out of those interviews. Those were one-on-one interviews that I did, which with the development team members. And from that, I will be creating the beginnings of this roadmap for software development and where Vireo needs to go, where future Vireo version needs to be. And I will be sharing that with Courtney and Christy. We will be discussing that at the TDL level. Eventually, we will have some community developer as opposed to individual interviews that we've done before. We'll have community developer meetings where we'll all get together as a team and discuss, and we'll really hash out uh, timelines and things like that. But I'll talk about that in just a little bit. And then I'd also like to say we've done a good deal of outreach. We presented at Open Repositories back in May, and that went very well. And we made some good connections and really spread the word about Vireo. We just, what was that, 2 weeks ago, presented at USETDA, the joint USETDA NDLTD uh, International Symposium on Electronic Thesis and Dissertations. So did that. And we have a presentation coming up on Wednesday that we will be doing for Scolaris. So I think I can announce that here that we're doing that. Scolaris is an institutional repository service provider in Canada. They have over 20 member institutions. I don't know exactly how many, but they have at least 20 something that I've counted. And actually, one of the things that came out of being at Open Repositories was that I met Julia Gilmore, and we have set this up. She has invited us to come and speak at one of their monthly, I believe their monthly meetings. So we're going to go do that on Wednesday and share Vireo with our friends to the north. We're really looking forward to that and to seeing what they think about Vireo and exposing this great project to them. So future work, we will continue to expand the development team. We'll continue to work on that at least. Like I said, we made some really good progress on that and that I'm excited about, but I don't plan to stop there. I really do plan to continue to reach out to the Vireo user community and to try to get more involvement in the development team of Vireo. So we will keep working on that. We will continue to work on OSS funding strategies. I don't have really good details to share with you right now. There's nothing that is really in place here. We're thinking about some different things. I can tell you that we have been watching the D-Space project in regards to this. We watched the D-Space project in regards to lots of things, and we've learned a lot from them, and I'm very grateful to them. Had some um, good conversations with Tim and Holger about different aspects of open source project management and different things like that. But we really watch DSpace because, you know, they're a little ways ahead of us in their development as an open source project. And there's a lot that we can learn from both their successes and their failures. And we have been learning from both of those things. And this is one of the areas that we are where we're watching them and we're trying to learn from them. Um, so as I mentioned earlier, we're working on a long-term software development roadmap. I am compiling the results, as I mentioned earlier, of those developer interviews that I discussed. I am looking into the viability of all of the suggestions that I got from that, and I got a myriad of suggestions, really great suggestions. We've got a lot of good possibilities um, for future development for Vireo. We've just got to whittle it down and settle on some things. So as I mentioned earlier, I will be sharing that later with Christy and Courtney and talking to them. We will discuss next steps. And eventually, we will move into group development team discussions. And those will be a little more to hash out the details and the timelines of what this roadmap really will look like. You know, how long will it take to do the things that we want to do, and what kinds of things do we want to do, and how do we implement all of that, and how long will it take? So that's what those discussions will be about. So we're working on that. And then as well as I mentioned earlier, community engagement. So we're looking for ways to engage and better acquire feedback for us and to provide assistance to you all. So we're looking for this is really for everyone. It will help everyone is what we believe, and the results from the question that Courtney asked earlier looks like you're all excited to maybe start doing this. And I can tell you here on the Vireo side, we're excited to start doing this. This is something else that we've watched DSpace do, and we're kind of taking from the DSpace playbook. So we will discuss this a little bit more later after the break. I won't go into a lot of detail here. I just want you all to know that we are focused on community engagement, and I'm focused on community engagement, and it is very important to us that we have lines of communication to you all so that we can communicate, so that we can tell you what we're doing. You can tell us what you're doing and what your expectations are, because, you know, this project is not about the development team or about TDL or decisions being made at those levels. Yes, decisions are made at those levels, and at some point decisions have to be made at a certain place, but it's really about the users. The users are the drivers of this project, not the development team and not TDL. And it's important to me as the product manager that that stays that way, and that really is the future of Vireo. I believe that that is the future of Vireo. The future of Vireo is the user group. All of the rest is there to support the user group, and their use of this system. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that you all are so very important to us, and we want to engage with you more often, and we are looking for ways to do that. So if you ever have any suggestions on ways to do that, please let us know. We've got some ideas, but we would love to hear your ideas as well. We can move on to development status updates. So since our meeting last year, we have released 3 new versions of Vireo. Of the 3, one was a patch release. That was the first one. We moved to 4.2.10. That was prior to the sprints that we did in the spring. Once we did the sprints in the spring, we ended up with what we consider a minor upgrade to 4.3. There was a lot of work, and you can go look at the version history on GitHub and see all of the work that was done. It was enough, and more than enough, really, for the development team to decide that this really was a minor version upgrade for Vireo. Significant changes. There were many bug fixes, of course, always many bug fixes. But we had some UI enhancements, including the new logo that you saw today, if you haven't seen it already, or that you see at the top of your screen on your new version of Vireo. We have had feature enhancements, including better messaging for students and advisors. This, I think, is something we were really excited about doing this and really fitting that into this last round of sprints. So we're excited that that all functions. That's some of that function. It's not entirely new functionality. Some of that existed already. We just made it better, and we made it work better for the students and the advisors. And so we're really proud of that. And of course, we're always trying to make Vireo more accessible. This is a very high priority for the development team, for TDL, and really just for the entire Vireo project. Accessibility is very important, and we'll talk more about that after the break. John has some good comments to share with you about things that he's been doing in his task force, and this is very important to us. And I can tell you, as the product manager, this is very important as we look to future versions of Vireo. This is very high on our list of priorities and will be considered from the ground up as we talk about new versions of Vireo. This will be at the forefront of our minds in how we make decisions about the technologies that we use and the development practices that we employ for our development cycles. So we've worked on all of those things. And of course, the latest version of Vireo, although not as involved as previous versions, but no less important, I think, was a security release. We had a security issue that was not directly in Vireo, but was in a library that we use in Vireo, and so we want you all to know that security is very important to us, and that we take that it's uh, it's very important. We take it very seriously, and we are staying on top of it. And you may see other things that come along, and just know that we're on it, and we're watching. So that's all I have about the development status. I will turn it over to Frank if he has anything specifically. Frank is the lead Vireo developer at TDL, and so if he has anything that he wants to add. please feel free to, Frank.
No, I think that's pretty comprehensive.
Frank, if you could add a little bit about the challenges of the newest version and
Uh,
what to
the-
expect from the upcoming mini sprint.
yeah, certainly. There have been some of the exports. There's an out-of-date library that we need to update that's prohibiting the Excel export. There's some fixes that didn't make it into the ProQuest export. So there's a few things that we're going to have a mini sprint in the next few weeks and try to fix some of those and roll out what would probably be a version 4.3.2. But that'll be in sometime in the next few weeks that we hope to get that going. And it'll be just a few minor tweaks, but these are things for some people.
Okay, that's really what I have. I maybe I talked fast or something, but that's or are we on time? I don't have the schedule up,
We're a
so I'm
little ahead of time, so I
a
think
little
we
ahead
can
of time.
let's
Okay.
pause here for questions just about
Sure.
Christopher's
Yeah.
work and some of the development status. And development in particular. And just as a reminder, after the break, we'll get into some updates about accessibility, and we'll also talk about strategies for community engagement. And we'll also have a larger discussion where we can talk about the ins and outs and your workflow challenges you might be experiencing. So for now, you can either raise your hand if you have a question, and then you can unmute and ask it, or you can ask your question about development and Christopher's work in chat.
I don't know if you all can hear me, but I'm
Yeah,
having internet troubles. So
it sounds much better now. You froze barely for a second when you were speaking
I
before, Frank.
I had to relocate a little bit.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. Everybody wants a break. So, so everyone, for the break, we're just gonna break for 5 minutes before we come back. So mute your mic and video. We'll see you back here in 5 minutes. So just at 10:51 a.m. And then we'll talk about accessibility, more about some of the development, and have an open discussion. See you soon. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you got a chance to stretch, stand up, get some water, get some coffee, get some tea. We're going to jump back into our presentations. And we're going to start off with the fabulous John Krosno. So John, I'm going to hand over you to talk about your task force on accessibility resources.
Yes, thank you. So earlier this year, we put out a call for some people who might be interested in participating on this task force, and I wanted to mention who was actually on it. In addition to me as the chair, Kristen Clark from Texas Women's University, Joe Dobbs from the University of Texas, Jeannie Hoover from East Carolina University, Susan Hoover from University of Houston, Shannon Kaput-Smith from Rice University, and Courtney, who was like an ex officio member, a liaison with back to TDL and the rest of the steering committee too. So, and we met and tried to discuss various things, and we came up with the one product that we're going to share in a second. But I do want to mention that the task force does intend to we intend to reconvene intermittently to update resources and check on the status of things. And if anyone is interested in joining, you can always reach out to us on the Vireo users group listserv, and we would very much appreciate any participation or feedback you might have. In terms of the main work product that we have, during our conversations, we recognized that a lot of what the main thing we wanted to provide was something that would be useful to help students and advisors with becoming aware of the requirements. But in that regard, we didn't want to overwhelm them. So we worked up a one-page document that basically summarizes just provides a brief summary of the regulations with some links out. It provides some general definitions, what student and advisor responsibilities would be, the major elements that are necessary for an accessible document, as well as providing some resources and tools to learn more and help guide the process of working on accessible documents. And we provided a link to the document itself that's provided both as in a couple links in chat and the QR code that's on the slide. And the next slide actually has a brief snapshot as well as the QR code of what the page looks like. So it's provided a brief summary of things, and it's something that we wanted to, like I said, share out, not overwhelm people, but make sure that people got the highlights. There are other groups, other TDL groups that have actually worked on some other accessibility options, guidelines, toolkits that we can provide links to as those are more focused on those specific systems like open journal systems. DSpace has started working on a DSpace group has also been recently created to work on DSpace side of things. But if there are any questions about our accessibility work, we're certainly more than welcome to hear from you.
Thanks, John. And also, I said it in chat already, but I'll say it again. Thanks to the whole committee for putting this together, and also just for committing to come back together and check back as accessibility requirements will change, and I'm sure that new resources will become available. So I think it's great that you're willing to come back and kind of keep checking in on that and making sure that Vireo users have some more information. John, I see here we have a question from Boyd in chat. Do you have any accessibility advice for students who create documents using LaTeX?
I want to think that one of the one of the resource links that we provided does have a page set aside for LaTeX guides, but if not, I know there is one that we may need to track down and find again. But I know that there is one out there. So
And I think we also linked to it on the wiki.
yeah,
And Susan mentions that the OJS Accessibility Working Group also has some links related to that. So if anyone could share those resources in the chat, that would be incredibly useful. Ed has a question. Does Vireo and/or DSpace have a VPAT conformance report? That's a great question, Ed. There is a DSpace VPAT TDL has created on the TDL wiki, and I believe there's another DSpace VPAT as well. Is Christy still here? She could tell us. I don't know if she's still here. Yeah, I think we lost Christy Park. But there's definitely a DSpace VPAT on the TDL wiki, Ed. And we are working on a TDL Vireo VPAT right now that is in Christopher Starcher's hands to review. I was hoping to have it ready by this meeting, but just, things. So you will see that announcement on the Vireo user group list once that's complete. And then James Creel also mentions here that one could run the final PDF through a checker and work backward to the source LaTeX from there. Thank you, James. And you also endorse, James, that the thesis office personnel check the final PDFs, yes, and kick them back to the student if there are issues, of course. Thank you, Shannon, for sharing that DSpace VPAT. I knew there was one. I appreciate that. And then again, there's also a specific one on the TDL wiki for TDL hosted DSpace instances for those of you who have hosted DSpace. Any other questions? Thank you, Susan, for sharing the OJS LaTeX resources. Awesome. I'm going to give y'all one more minute here on accessibility questions before we move on. And again, I want to highlight what John said. If you want to volunteer for this group to be a part of it when they reconvene and check in, just let us know on the listserv, on the Vireo users group listserv, and we'll be sure to invite you back when they reconvene. John, when would that be? Sometime in the late winter, early spring?
yeah, late winter, early spring. Yes.
Thanks. Okay. I think that's all of our questions on accessibility. John, thank you again. Let's go ahead and move on to the next set of discussion presentation. Handing it back to Christopher now to lead a discussion on some opportunities for user feedback.
All right, so we have several venues that you can use to communicate with us. One of those is GitHub issues. And I know that oftentimes those of you who are not developers are sometimes intimidated by GitHub. I've heard that comment more than once. But I want to reassure you that it's really not that difficult to use GitHub for issues, and it's one of the reasons we decided to move all of our issue tracking and all of that to GitHub, was because it was easy for just really anyone to use. All you need to do is create an account if you don't already have one. One of the improvements we've made over the past couple of years is to create templates for you to use to give us feedback, because just using a generic fill in this form on your own I think was part of the intimidation to using that. So we've given you a template that gives you an outline of things that we're looking for from the developers side of things, and just follow along with those. Give as much information as you can, and let us know if you're having problems with the systems. A lot of times there are so many features to Vireo that it's really impossible for us to use the system every way that you all use it. And so there are things that we miss and we've just never seen. So please let us know if you do see that. If you are at a place where you're having an issue and GitHub is just really frightening you, you are welcome to contact me and let me know what your concern is, and I will assist you with that, and we can get that issue addressed. Documentation is another way that you can participate in the project. If you're using Vireo and you see that there's a hole in documentation, it's possible that we're aware of it, because we are aware that there are holes in the documentation right now, but it's also possible that we are unaware of it. So please feel free to let us know about it. If you are someone who likes to do documentation and that's just tickles your fancy, we would love for you to participate in the project on that. We can get you set up if you would like to provide screenshots and um, details about how the feature's used, or things like that. We'd love to have you help us with that. So documentation's an ever-evolving part of the project, and we need as much help with that as possible. So you don't have to be a developer to participate on a project like this. We really need help with documentation. So please feel free to get in touch with me if you are one of those people and would like to participate in that. And I will be more than happy to get you set up and get you started on the path to helping the project with documentation. Of course, most of you, I'm sure, are on the listserv, but if there are those of you who are not on the listserv, we do have a listserv. It's a great place to ask questions. The community is very responsive. It's usually not even me that responds. There are if it's something technical, then I will very possibly jump in, but most of the conversations are non-technical on the listserv, and it's a great place for people to ask questions of their peers, their colleagues that are also using Vireo. There are lots of people on that listserv who have been using Vireo for many years and have an extensive amount of knowledge about the functionality, about how to do certain things better ways, things like that. So I if you are not part of the listserv, I highly recommend that you become part of the listserv. And do we have the link for that? I think we
Yeah,
have
I
it
shared, thank you
here.
so, I shared the how to participate page of the
Oh,
wiki
there it
that's
is.
got everything. Yeah,
Yes, okay, I see it. Sorry, I'm not paying attention to the chat right now.
no
I'm
worries. There's a lot
looking
going
at my
on.
looking at my slides and my notes. Um, so yes, the listserv, great resource for all of you. So please sign up for that. That's also where we do any announcements about new version releases, all of those things. So if anything that pertains to Vireo that we need to broadcast to the broader community, it will come out in the listserv. So even if you don't have questions, it's still worth I think your time to sign up for the listserv just to get those announcements. We have a couple of Slack channels. One is a community channel that you can join, that is um, not developer oriented, but if you are trying to get your Vireo up and running at your institution, if you're self-hosting, So this is one way that you can use this channel is, and you have trouble, you're having trouble or you have questions about your deployment or something like that, you can get some technical help in the community Slack channel. That is a great resource, and we've got a lot of members there. And I think most, if I don't know if all of the development team is on that, but at least a good portion of the development team is in that community. And we can respond to you and help you get your Vireo set up and answer questions and things like that. So if you're new to Vireo, so let us know if you would like to be part of that channel, and Courtney specifically can get you set up doing that. And then we also have a development channel, and this is specifically for developers. So if you would like to be on the development team, let me know. We can set you up on that channel. This is where we discuss the very technical issues and all of the things going on concerning development for Vireo, and that channel is specific to that. So it's really only a developer channel. But if you are interested or someone at your institution is interested in being a developer, let me know. We would be happy to include them in that channel. So moving on, future opportunities for user feedback. As we discussed earlier, we've been thinking about this, and we would like to hear from you. We've heard from you a little bit already, and overwhelmingly, you wanted to have some new opportunities to share your thoughts or to learn or what have you with the larger community. So we have been discussing having more frequent. Right now, historically, we've had TCDL. We have a user group meeting at TCDL every year. And then we have this meeting, this virtual meeting every year. But we thought it would be important for us to do more. So we are considering maybe a quarterly meeting that would be virtual, where everyone could come in and it would be very informal. You wouldn't have to listen to me talk all the time like you're doing today. Um, it would really be about you and you sharing your experiences, asking your questions with your peers, your Vireo using peers, your user group peers, and getting advice and feedback. And you can share things you've learned, and they can share what they've learned, and just really a place for the community to come together and discuss things. So I'm really curious. I know that Courtney asked this earlier, if people would be interested in this. So I already know that overwhelmingly you are. I would be curious to know, though, would this, what you as the user group uh, think this should look like? Should it be a quarterly meeting? Should it be biannually? Should it be once a month? I mean, we can do all kinds of things. I'm curious to know what you think would be helpful.
I'm watching for chat, also watching for raised hands. Um, or you can just unmute if you feel comfortable jumping in with kind of ways you'd like to meet, the kinds of interactions you would like to see.
Quarterly, okay, sure.
So adding two more options.
Mm-hmm. Quarterly, okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
monthly is too much. Shelley's saying because the ETD calendar has some really intense seasons,
Yes.
monthly could be too much. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yes. And I will say this, so we can always, we can always start out and we can say, let's just do this quarterly. And then if we get to a point where the broader community thinks, oh no, we need to do this more often, or if we're in a stage where we need a lot of feedback for development purposes, which could happen in the future as we look to starting at some point a future version of Vireo. It may be that we may, on our side, need to call some more frequent um, sessions just to get feedback from everyone and to kind of show you where things are and and get your ideas. So we can. This doesn't have to be. What my point is we can set this, but it doesn't have to be set in stone. We can change it. We could just say quarterly. And then if we need to do it more often here or there, or change it to more often for the long term, we can always reevaluate that later.
We
So it
haven't
looks
had
like,
too
go
many,
ahead.
sorry, we haven't had too many suggestions yet about format for those extra two meetings or gatherings. So I am curious what folks are thinking, whether it's just an informal opportunity to join a call that combines developers and leadership and users to talk about Vireo, whether it would want to be inviting folks to share their workflows. Any ideas from y'all about what you would like to see in those other two meetings? And I'll just wait a second here for folks to contribute. Shannon, thank you. So Shannon says she'd be interested in themed calls, for example, focus on accessibility, focus on workflows. Thank you.
I'll mention also, I'm reading Allison, your comment. We will try as well as we schedule these to be uh, to be cognizant of your schedules, the user schedules within the semester. So we'll try to figure out a good times on the calendar for everyone. And so, like you said, earlier in the semesters would be easier for you all because yes, I understand as you get further into the semester, in the middle of the semester, and then certainly at the end of the semester, it's all hands on deck a lot of times for you. So we will certainly take that into consideration as we schedule these.
And I'll highlight James. James mentioned here that those two gatherings should probably just include the very basics at the beginning. So development updates about new releases and sprints, etc. Things that maybe we've shared to the listserv, but we haven't said to a community. But he also notes that we should have a call for participation in those meetings so that people in the community who have interesting workflows or trying to figure out their workflows or issues could basically say, I'd like an item on the agenda, and then we can make them the focus in advance. I like that idea for a call.
I do too.
Yeah, and that could help. Whatever feedback we get could help define that theme. Yeah, that's a great suggestion, James. Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any more comments on that. So I think we can go ahead and move on to your survey, Christopher.
Okay. As we have done the past few years, 2 years, I guess. We've done this at least 2 years. We have a survey. We would like to get some feedback from everyone. Some of it has been covered before. What version are you using? This just kind of puts it in a little bit more of a formal format for us to evaluate it. But it's not a very long survey, so I would appreciate if, let me share it. Let me share the link with everyone. If you would take the time, oh, thanks, Billy. Sorry, you're the link person. I forgot. Apologize. Now you get two links. If you would take some time to fill this out, and if you don't have any functionality comments, that's fine. You don't have to answer all of the questions. A few of them are required, but not many. But please do, if you do have comments, this is one of the best ways that we get information right now about either things that are going well, things that are not going well in the system with how you use the system. And so please feel free to add as much content to that as possible. It really does help us to kind of gauge where we are right now on the development side, and to know, are we meeting the user's needs? And so this survey is really important to us. So please, I would really appreciate everyone to fill this out so that we can kind of get a gauge of what's going on in the community. And as well, there are some questions there. If you have any colleagues that that would like to be involved with development or anything like that, please feel free to share their names, and I can reach out to them. That actually is partially how we got some new developers in this last round of sprints. So that's very helpful. Billy asked for a deadline for the survey. There's no real hard set deadline. You can do it after this meeting. You can do it later this afternoon. You can do it later this week. Today's Monday. So you can do it later this week. We'll take your comments anytime, so please feel free to do that. Certainly if you want to do it sooner than later, just so you don't forget about it, and to make sure your voice is heard, then you can do that. But there's no hard and fast deadline for it.
I think by next year, I think, Christopher, this will be really nice. We will have had 3 years of this same survey with, I think, basically the same questions, so that we can have an even better kind of longitudinal view of the changing community. I'm excited to see that.
Yes, yes. And as well as I spoke earlier about future to Vireo development. We will at some point have more surveys for everyone. This is just the one we do here at this meeting, but we will have more surveys of the community as we get to the place where we need more input from the community. But the nice thing is that we'll hopefully be having more meetings by then, and we can share that in those meetings and share our comments and things like that. So anyway, so I appreciate everyone for filling out that survey. It really does help us a lot.
Thank you. All right, so now we've gotten slightly early, but not too early, to the part of the meeting that has been really helpful in the past couple of years for folks to just share, ask for advice about certain challenges that you're having with Vireo, have an open discussion about your experiences of Vireo, of upgrades, of security updates, anything that you want to talk about. And while you're thinking of your questions or discussion topics, I just wanted to again thank John, Christopher, Frank, and our Vireo user group steering committee for helping us put this presentation together today for the user group, and also just for all you do over the course of the year. So again, this can be questions and discussion for any of TDL staff, developers, steering committee members, or just connect with other users about how they're using Vireo, or how they're doing workarounds, or how they're managing particular workflows. So with that, I'm going to shush. You can feel free to unmute yourself, raise your hand, or go ahead and contribute in chat. But of course, we'd love to see you. And I'm going to stop sharing the screen right now as well, so that we can maybe have all of their faces on the screen for anyone who wants to unmute their video. Hi, folks. I'm watching the chat, but also watching for raised hands. If there's anything you want to talk about, stuff you're struggling with in Vireo right now. You've got the great group. James, I see your actual human hand. Go ahead.
Okay, I think a lot of you have probably heard this one before, but at A&M, we have had this perennial issue with a batch publish from Vireo producing duplicate records in the DSpace repository. Yeah, I see Frank nodding because he knows we're facing this issue. And our technicians are working hard to figure out what is going on, but we still don't have an answer. And so we have to do like a manual remediation and eliminate duplicates every time we do a batch publish, which, it's not that big a deal, but it is inconvenient and it's highly undesirable to be minting these handles that you have to discard. So I just put it to the group. Has anyone else experienced this problem, or are we unique in this situation?
First I thought you were talking about not duplicate records in DSpace, which not encountered that, but duplicate a particular keyword entry that ends up with a blank.
Oh
keyword
yeah, or
entry.
like
So
field
that's a
values. Yeah,
different
that's a different matter. That
yes, I'm sorry.
sometimes. Yeah, that's uncanny, but that's like a different thing.
Certainly.
I'm seeing a couple of things here in chat, and I'll just say them for the recording. Rachel from Johns Hopkins has mentioned that that's happened there with Vireo 3, but they haven't seen it in Vireo 4 so far, having upgraded back in July. And then Shannon from Rice has shared with us that they've experienced that same problem, especially with records that have multimedia files or large file sizes.
And I would also say that there are different potential causes for this problem. So I think in some cases, thesis office personnel might press the button more than once. And if that happens, you will end up with duplicate records. We have gotten quite careful about coordinating the push events with our thesis office. And so we have come to where we ensure that they press the button exactly once and only once. And so we've excluded that as a cause, although especially even back in the Vireo 3 days, we think that was a cause here at our campus. So, but there's something else going on now that has something to do with a bug in the code or a problem in our networking infrastructure, which is way too complicated.
Yeah, and as Frank mentioned, I don't think we've seen this at all across any of our 13 hosted members.
That is correct.
Rachel in chat says that when they encountered it in Vireo 3, it would happen to isolated submissions out of a batch.
Hmm. And Shannon, which version of Vireo are y'all running?
We're in 3 as well right now. And I will say, I think it'd be similar to what Rachel experienced with kind of isolated items within a whole batch.
Yeah, and just like some anecdotal information here, for small batches, it doesn't seem to be a problem. for the larger batches, it happens for more instances. And it's also very unpredictable. Sometimes you get just a duplicate, sometimes you get 3 copies. It's all over the place. It's the worst kind of bug to debug because it's very hard to reproduce and pin down causes. Well, thank you for the feedback. Like I said, our technicians are continuing to work on this, and so I'll certainly keep the group apprised of anything that we come up with.
Thanks, James. It's always tricky to those ones that are unpredictable are especially pesky to track down. And I just want to note that Pascal has a suggestion that it might be an issue with the sword client itself. Thank you for that, Pascal. Other questions, workflow challenges, issues that you're seeing, please feel free to unmute. Ed, I see.
Hello, this is Ed Warga from St. Cloud State University. I'd like to do a little bit of networking with my time here today. Has anybody on the user, well, anywhere, has anybody anywhere here in this group done the migration from using bpress for ETDs to using Vireo and DSpace for ETDs? And if you have, let me know, because I'd love to like schedule a time to chat about the experience at some point.
Pascal.
Hi, Ed. We just, here at University of Windsor in Canada, we just migrated from bpress over the summer, and we're in the process of setting up the sword client. There's a lot of interest in using Vireo for ETDs because the workflow seems to be a little bit more elegant. It matches the kind of user experience a little bit better for our faculty graduate studies with what they expect out of like ETD admin. So I will keep your name handy. And once we actually get that sword client for our dev instance, yeah, maybe we can talk and I can share our experience. And we'd love to hear from yours.
Awesome. Yeah, I haven't started migrating yet, so that's where I am at in the process. So thank you, Pascal. Appreciate it.
I love to see it. Thanks, Shaw. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Pascal. Other questions, challenges? Daniel, hi.
Hey, hi, how are you guys? Sorry, I don't know if it's specific to Unity. Actually, I sent my email to Frank, but the published functionality is not working for us because we use our own submission system. We only use Vireo for submission system, not for depositing. So is there any possible workaround to use the publish functionality, or shall we expect any change?
It seems to me that's a whole different development of a different exporter utility, because if you're, I know we've talked about this a few times, but it's going to be a development engagement to get that going.
Just to give a little more background, UNT, while TDL hosts their Vireo instance, they export to their own homegrown repository. And so UNT actually, I believe, developed that connection. But it would be nice to have some kind of generic export function that people could adapt to their systems. Does that sound like kind of what you're looking for, Daniel, and what you were
just
talking about,
collaborate,
Frank?
yeah, and see so that we can use other functionality. For example, like notifying students that it is published. Those kind of post-publishing activities, we are kind of stuck. So if you can move on into published functionality, then you can add other additional functionalities.
And that could be something that your team could contribute to in GitHub. as an adjunct. We'd have to obviously discuss the broader issue of incorporating that into Vireo directly.
Thank you.
So I just want to note, James mentions here to this subject that the depositor was designed to be a modular part of the code, but he's just reaffirming that we would have to write a whole new depositor to go to another repository, or use another API more generally. So kind of create something that's a bit more generic that could be adapted more easily. And I think that's a reasonable suggestion. I'm interested in what you think about that, Christopher, and then we'll get to Laura's comment.
Yeah, that was a more elegant way of saying what I was trying to say. Yes, thank you, Jane.
Yes, if there were a generic way that we could create this functionality that could be used by other systems to implement this, that would be ideal. Of course, doing specific exports for specific systems could get pretty tedious. So um, we would entertain that, and we would be happy to collaborate on that. That's not in the immediate future right now. It's not something that we have planned, anything like that for any sprints coming up right now. Of course, that could change. We can always talk about it, and I'm happy to talk about it. We are discussing exports in relation to future development. So possibly not Vireo 4, but a future version of Vireo. We are discussing export specifically. We've already had some conversations about this and about making the export functionality. We have discussed to do something that would allow it to work with other systems, and as well to make it a little more cohesive. It's semi-cohesive now. It's possible to go in and create a new exporter in Vireo, as James mentioned, and that would work really with any system, but it's not as streamlined, I think, as it could be. And anyway, we are discussing this. This has come up, and we have had some discussions about this, but I don't have a timeline or anything like that to share with you. I don't really have an idea of where that sits on priority lists specifically for Vireo 4, but I can tell you for future development, it is on our radar for sure.
And so any of the UNT development
Mm.
team then, Christopher, who's kind of been working on that exporter, you would encourage them to
Yeah.
engage.
Absolutely. I mean, it could move up. So when I say that that's not on our radar specifically for Vireo 4 for us, that can change. If we have a group that decides that they are willing to, that's from our perspective as the Vireo core development team, and our priorities and the things that we have to prioritize for Vireo 4 right now. If um, um, if developers at your institution would like to engage with us about this and kind of push that up into Vireo 4 or something like that, we're always willing to have those conversations and discuss those kinds of possibilities. I'm certainly, please don't take what I said as being
Yeah,
that
it
it's
could
out of
be.
the realm of being in Vireo 4. It could be in Vireo 4.
Yeah.
I'm just laying out our priorities at the core development team, and we've got some other things that that are priorities right now for us, but we're always happy to have those discussions.
Well, yeah, it may not be the whole workflow to push the content into other repository. It's probably just adding a control vocabulary in the drop-down list that says, somewhere else, and then that triggers the next step, like sending email to student, as simple as that. So what we don't have is a location to show in the control vocabulary. It's different from TDL. So it might be as simple as adding control vocabulary, then that trigger the next step, which is published, and then that's it. It may not require the whole process of depositing into our system. It's already there. It's just we couldn't notify students. Yeah.
Yeah, it just depends. I mean, we would just have to have those conversations to kind of see, how difficult is this going to be? And really, I have no way to judge
Exactly.
that
Yeah,
now,
that's why
but I'm happy to have those conversations and we can discuss that and see, what it would take for sure. But
thank you.
it is important, and I don't want to lose what you're saying because as I mentioned, we have been discussing this in the Vireo development community, specifically about exports and having support for other systems other than just DSpace. That is something that is on our radar. So we're looking at it. It
Okay.
likely will happen at some point. I just really can't tell you when.
It used to have it in Vireo 3, so it's done already before, so it
Oh,
shouldn't
okay.
be that
Okay,
complicated.
I didn't
Yeah.
realize that. All right.
Yeah.
I'll move on here to Laura's comment that came up in this context is that at Texas State, which is a TDL hosted Vireo and a TDL hosted DSpace repository, their publish functionality isn't currently working, which that comes as news to me, actually. I thought that had been resolved, Laura. So what's going on there and how can Frank help you with that?
Oh no, it's all good. I was just responding when Daniel said I see, it was a different thing. No, we still can't publish. The only other thing is we've had to just deposit, like, we've had to upload stuff anyway because, um, the students need their stuff uploaded. But now I can't mark it as published either. So it's
Right,
just kind of
because you
sitting
didn't do
there.
it from the system, so Vireo doesn't
Yeah,
know it, and there's no way that you can adjust that manually.
no.
That would
So,
be an interesting, GitHub issue to create, is the
yeah,
ability to manually indicate if something has been published. That's
yeah, we
one
were able
thing.
to in Vireo 3. In our previous version, we could. I don't know if that's just a Vireo 4 then?
Very far when you do that act of publishing, that's when its status is upgraded. Is this related? I know, like Nick Lawlin and I have been talking with you about a ticket where you your system has been running out of memory, and we're trying to resolve that. Is that it's sporadically you
Probably.
can publish to DSpace at times, but then it'll
Actually,
be
no.
hung up
No, we
on at
can't
all. Okay.
publish to DSpace at all. But we've pretty much already just manually published things at this point. But I don't
Okay.
know.
Well,
I- We can't make any changes either. And when we do publish, none of the metadata actually matches our metadata. So at some point, I don't know. Like maybe I don't know if that's just how Vario 4 works. Like if we
uh,
publish, I don't know.
I'll have to go back and look at your ticket to see what we've resolved or what we were waiting on. I'll have to go back and
Are we
there are,
supposed to set it up to match our metadata?
your metadata has in DSpace, yes. If there's a mismatch, then it will have an error, and the reporting on that error isn't very good. We have to look at both log files, both at DSpace and Vireo sometimes.
Okay, I think it's just like it's putting things in DSpace, but it's not the metadata we actually use. So like when we were able to publish a couple, we basically had to go in and then delete like 7 or 8 fields and then add like 12 other fields because that's how our DSpace metadata works. Is that just because of how Vireo 4 works?
It shouldn't be. There's something mismatched then that we need to figure out. I don't think it's a very good force specific thing. I've
Okay.
not. I think it's something we need to resolve at your particular institution.
Frank, we do have a question though from Shelley. How do we match DSpace and Vireo metadata? Can you expound on what you just said?
Um, there's typically so you just need to make sure that what we are exporting in Vireo, if we're using, depends on what fields we're using. I know that some places use DC. I think it's DC something discipline versus degree program or something. I know there's a mismatch, and that's one we've encountered a bit. And it's just a matter of going into DSpace and adding that metadata field. That's generally how we've resolved it. So it's really a simple tweak on the DSpace end.
Catching up here in the comments. James is just reiterating you do have to customize your DSpace metadata schemata to accommodate all the fields.
Yeah, so if there's even just one mismatch, it will throw an error, but the error doesn't really indicate specifically what happened. So you need to walk through the metadata. And that's something Nick Lawland and I can help with.
I also want to emphasize a follow-up. Daniel, here, I hope you're following this thread. I see. Okay, good. So there's a follow-up thread about getting functioning that you were talking about that did exist for export into an external system in Vireo 3 that worked into 4. And so Christopher has just reiterated that Vireo 3 parity is a high issue. So if there is something that worked in 3, it's not a new issue. We want it working in 4. So that's already something we prioritize. And so if you can reach out directly to Christopher and the rest of the team, we'll try to get that in.
And it is customizable to an extent that what we can export to. So I mean that's all on how things are set up. All the sites that we are hosting though, well all but 2, we migrated them from Vireo 3. So whatever metadata was being used in 3 was mapped to what some of the default setups were in Vireo 4. But yes, that is one of the things that is customizable in Vireo 4.
Susan Hoover has asked in chat, is there any interest in revisiting the ETD metadata schema?
That's actually what I was just responding to.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
sorry, as getting a little
Just
ahead.
you have to reread that. Yeah, I want to make sure for the recording we get the questions in. And I think that's a question for the people here too, because we would ask for help from the user community. And so if there is interest in this community, it would be good to guess we got 1 thumbs up, Susan, for that. So you might have a team of 2, but we could look to maybe making that part of the call for quarterly meetings. Maybe we could have another discussion about the metadata schema, for example, at one of those quarterly convenings. Other questions, challenges, bugs, issues that you would like to talk about here? You've got rare access to quite a set of knowledgeable developers. Okay. not seeing any more in the chat, and no one is raising their hand. So I think we're going to go ahead and close the meeting. I want to thank you all for participating, for being here. That's huge just being here. We appreciate it. It's really nice for us to be able to see so many users in one place, who are either hosted by TDL or who are joining us from outside of TDL and using Vireo. Good to see some new faces here today too. So thank you again for that. Please do follow along with new developments as we think about new ways to convene. So you'll see that on the listserv. So again, if you're not already on the listserv, please join the listserv so you see the announcements about new convenings of the user group. But with that, I'm going to call this annual meeting of the Vireo users group to a close. And so everyone take care, and you'll see the recording and shared notes posted to the listserv within the next week. Take care, everybody. Thank you.